Going on, Jerome's. So perhaps the most polarizing player in team history was quarterback Kirk Cousins, right? And even though, Daddy Fu Manchu, Captain Cole's Cash, Kirko Chains obviously had some good times, right? But Kurt took the money and ran last offseason down to Atlanta. It did not work out because it's almost like a 36-year-old quarterback who is off an Achilles injury, as well as a guy who had to play 90% of his snaps in 2024 on a shotgun because he didn't have the mobility to do play action, even though he was one of the better play action quarterbacks in the league. I feel like that's a sign. That's a sign. But he is a year removed from that Achilles, and of course, Kevin O'Connell, Kirk Cousins have a great relationship. Frankly, if Kevin O'Connell had GM powers last offseason, they probably would have brought back Kurt at an exorbitant fee, but it is what it is. And we've talked extensively about, hey, the Vikings are looking for a backup quarterback for J.J. McCarthy, as well as insurance, a little bit of a hedge, and who knows the offense better than Kirk Cousins. Now, yes, he is going to be 37, but another year removed from that Achilles, and we've laid out explicit instructions. So, yes, a full medical check on the Achilles. You're not trading you're not giving up much in terms of capital. Also, Cousins does have a no trade clause. Doesn't mean he can't be traded. It means that he has to waive his veto power, right? And also, all of the cash, all of that stuff, everything like that. And Kurt has to know and accept that he is the backup quarterback, which I think that he will. Long story longer. So, I don't think that the Falcons want to hang on to Kurt. They're not going to just straight up cut him because they've already paid him, and his salary this year is fully guaranteed. Plus, he has a $10 million fully guaranteed roster bonus in 2026. Now, that can offset if they move him and the new team takes that on. But I don't know, they seem happy to have him as backup quarterback, but every single game he's there is just another reminder to the fan base that they failed last offseason. Even though Michael Penix Jr., I think, has a bright future, they just absolutely effed themselves, and they screwed up. No one was bidding against them, but they gave a lavish contract to a player coming off an injury at an advanced age, which he simply could not play last year. Frankly, Kurt probably should have sat out a full season, but he didn't, right? So I think that the Falcons could move him because they are snug against the cap, and potentially move him for some cap space, which we'll talk about here. Schefter, latest on the Falcons draft plan, Cousins' future. Publicly, the Falcons have said they're not interested in trading quarterback Kirk Cousins. Of course, you have to say that in a negotiation, but that they'd entertain offers if the right deal was on the table. Privately, they have had discussions with teams and have asked for a lot in return, per sources. Now, that's what happens, where it's not always the team that's trying to do business that leaks it. It's the team trying to do business with other teams. They generally leak it, right? Atlanta has asked for any inquiring team to pay $20 million of the $45 million worth of guarantees left on Kirk Cousins' contract. To date, no one has been willing to do that, and no team is expected to be willing to. But what happens this weekend, which franchises come out of the draft with or without rookie quarterbacks, could influence how much guaranteed money a team might be willing to absorb on Cousins' contract. There's a feeling around the league that a team, whether it's the Vikings or the Steelers, might be willing to pay down roughly $10 million. How much of that team would be willing to pay also would influence the compensation it gives up. The higher the payment, the lower the draft compensation. The lower the payment, the higher the draft compensation. The Falcons and Cousins, who has a no-trade clause, recognize their future is not together, and how it will play out, it could be very well influenced by this draft. If the Vikings make a move for Kurt, I want it to be before the draft, because I want the Vikings to get back draft capital in this draft. Now, what we're proposing is something that we've talked about before, because remember, so Brock Osweiler, after the Broncos Super Bowl run, signed a very stupid contract with the Texans. And then the Texans traded him to Cleveland for less draft capital than they got back because the Browns took on part of the salary cap. It was the first trade of its kind in NFL history. Hasn't really happened since. But that's what we would suggest to the Falcons. You give us higher trade capital in trade, and the Vikings will take on a certain portion of the cap for Kirk Cousins. Now, I know that Vikings fans will be upset. We're not giving Kirk Cousins another red cent, but think about it. What is the reason why the Vikings haven't been active in the veteran quarterback backup market, right? So Flacco, Mariota, Jabroni Brisket, Drew Lock, everyone out there. Was Kirk Cousins the target all along? And the Vikings do have some cap space, around $17 million. They get an extra $5 million after post June 1st. Is it a spot where the Vikings make this move even before the draft, right? Because if you look at Kirk Cousins' stupid-ass contract with the Falcons, his base salary, $27.5, is fully guaranteed this year, plus he does have that $10 million roster bonus next year. Now, obviously, he's not going to be playing out the final 2 years of his contract, so something will have to be reworked in that. But I think the Vikings can work with the Falcons because the Falcons don't have a ton of cap space either this year or next year because of the Kirk Cousins contract, and they weren't able to be players of free agency like a lot of their fans wanted them to be, and making this move, freeing up some cap space, could make some sense. So this is what we propose. So the Vikings do have that cap space. I think they can work things out. So the Vikings would trade a 2026 7th-round pick, which you have to have something on the ledger in terms of the transaction. All right, so a 2026 7th-round pick. The Vikings have 3 7th-rounders now, so it's really nothing. $10 million of his $25 million cap this year. So they would take on $10 million of his guaranteed base salary this year. The Falcons take on the rest, but they get $10 million in cap relief this year. And then the Vikings will take on the $10 million in 2026. Now, they could feather that out with a new contract. They could add void years. They could do a lot of things with that. But either way, at the end of the day, it is $20 million in cap relief for the Falcons over the next 2 years. Now, in exchange for that, the Vikings get Kirk Cousins, who I still think, if he accepts his role, might have to ask him to work on Tuesdays, would be a perfectly fine backup quarterback for J.J. McCarthy. And, of course, he and Kevin O'Connell go way back like chiroprac. I think it does make sense. Plus, I feel like even though Kurt was sort of annoying to some of the fan base because lack of results versus what he got paid, I feel like there wouldn't be such animosity and vitriol that he can't come back as a quarterback too. Clear backup for J.J. McCarthy, right? Also, for our trouble and for our $20 million, essentially the Vikings are pulling off the Osweiler. The Vikings are essentially buying higher draft picks. So in exchange for $10 million in each season, we get the Falcons' number 46 overall pick in the middle of the second round for $10 million this year. Also, 2026 second-round pick for the $10 million that's due in 2026. So basically, the Vikings spend $20 million to get a decent veteran backup quarterback with familiarity with the scheme, as well as 2 second-round picks. I feel like that's fairish. All right, so, and the Falcons like, oh, we don't want to do that. Shut up then. No one's doing business with you. The Steelers ain't doing it. Ain't nobody doing it. We're literally the only game in town. So if you want this deal, make the call. Fontenot, call Kwesi, get this thing done, and do it before the draft. Like I said, I would rather do this now so the Vikings have 1, 2, 3 again in day 1, day 2, as well as getting some extra nice in the second-round pick. So the Vikings have extra second, third, and potentially fifth next year in the draft. Certainly would not mind that. And again, there's a lot of moving parts, and Cousins has to accept his role, but that's where we stand right now. Hey, Falcons, if you want that cap relief, it's going to cost you, Chief. Do that up. Anyways, your thoughts are thoughts. Cousins, backup, Vikings, sure. Let us know. Comment section. You guys are the best. You know what to do. Skol, production value.